You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with Esther Krakue and James Rampton. Welcome to you both. Let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Observer has a warning from a top economist to the Chancellor that tax cuts could backfire. That's ahead of Jeremy Hunt's spring budget on Wednesday. The Express also leads on pre-budget warnings. Their headline, cut tax or lose grey vote. The Times reports that the Prime Minister and Chancellor are battling to find the money to slash personal taxes by 2p in Wednesday's budget. The Mirror has an exclusive. Their headline, Andrew faces fresh court bombshell as further evidence relating to paedophile Jeffrey Epstein is going to be made public by special decree. And the Daily Star features a woman's claim of being addicted to mayonnaise. There are worse addictions, I'm sure. A reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Esther Krakue and James Rampton. Thank you both for being with us tonight. Let's start with the Express and tax cuts, potential tax cuts. We don't know as yet. And as we read in some of the papers, they are still being decided on as late as tomorrow evening. James?
Yeah, it's fascinating because the budget is on Wednesday, as you mentioned, and apparently there are some behind-the-scenes tussles going on between numbers 10 and 11 over the extent of tax cuts, if they even have the money to bring them about at all. I think this is a very well-placed story, and the Sunday Express notably has an older readership. Also, it's worth noting that the grey vote is absolutely crucial in any election. They are the section of society that votes most per capita. They're the most keen voters in any general election. Yeah. So it's very important to play to them. And this is interesting, I didn't know this, that since the Tories came to power 14 years ago, the tax burden, particularly income tax, has doubled on pensioners. They've been dragged into paying more because of the continuing freeze on personal allowances, and more than 1 million more pensioners now pay tax. So this is vital for them. But a key caveat here is that Mr Hunt had been considering a 2p tax cut, but his dwindling kitty, as they say, means that he may not be able to afford it. As Liam Byrne famously said when he left office in 2010, there's no money left.
The note that was
left for his successor, yes.
Yes, and this fabled headroom that we've been hearing a lot about.
Fiscal headroom.
At the beginning of the year, 30 billion, and has now been reduced to 13 billion, we read.
I mean, the question is, why not just raise the personal tax threshold? Because they've been frozen for so long. Like you said, 1 million pensioners have been dragged into it because of inflation. But it's who you want to annoy less and what you can get away with, because obviously fewer people, there are fewer working people than, say, people that would be affected if you raise the personal tax threshold. So you can see that he's been trying to spin it as something as to not punish productivity. But obviously that's not going to work, because as a working person, if you hear, oh, I get 2p off taxes, an extra 2p off, that's not really going to get you out to vote for the Tories. So it looks like they're probably going to have to pander to the pensioners. I just don't think it's going to be possible this time around. But it's going to be interesting because, like you said, the grey vote are the most active. They tend to be the least apathetic, if you would put it that way. And it's important to not annoy them. I mean, that's why the Tories have been so adamant on maintaining the pension triple lock, even though it's costing the country a lot of money, because you don't want to annoy that section of the public.
And do you think, James, that what we're reading now, I mean, today's Saturday, do you think it's all about lowering expectations so that whatever is the outcome on Wednesday, people aren't too disheartened and disappointed?
Yes, I mean, this has changed in my lifetime. There used to be something called purdah, where the Chancellor went incommunicado for several days before a budget. No leaks emerged from number 10, but now all of it is in the Sunday papers. Yeah. So there are no surprises, and I absolutely agree, Gillian. It's about lowering expectations. There are lots of, very, very eager right-wingers on the Tory backbenches who are saying our only chance of winning the election is to cut taxes.
Which is very optimistic.
It is optimistic, if not absolutely fantasy land. And the Observer story, which I think we're going to talk about, it warns two ex-Treasury aides as saying we must stop being obsessed with the short term.
Let's move on to that,
And if Jeremy Hunt does manage to cut taxes, if he finds this mythical headroom, all he will be doing is sabotaging the prospects for the next government. But in the process, he'll be trashing what is left of the Tories' reputation for economic competence, which after Liz Truss's disastrous mini-budget is not much. You know, many mortgages doubled in the wake of that. So, you know, it doesn't look good for the Tories, however you spin it.
Yeah.
Yes, and Esther, the economists are warning that the country needs to break out of a cycle of short-termism, as they're describing it.
Well, no, he's completely right. And at the end of the day, it doesn't do the country any good to tinker around at the edges and set false expectations. You know, the Tories should be known for fiscal discipline, not just tax cuts. I find it absurd that the damage of the last 14 years can be undone with the 2p cut in national insurance. It's completely ludicrous. But, you know, it just shows how desperate the Tories are. Fortunately for Labour, they don't have to contemplate this. They just don't have to completely destroy their image before they effectively become the next government.
They can do that when they're in power.
Exactly, but the Tories they're in damage control mode. They have to do something that still harks back to some sort of conservative policy making. So I think it's unfortunate. But yes, this country's obsession with short-term thinking and, oh, what can I get out of the next election as opposed to what's the best direction for the country to head in is probably why we're in this mess, because we haven't thought long-term about energy policy, about taxes, about, you know, interest rates or any of that. And that's why we're in the mess we're in now.
And James, what the economists are saying is that the Chancellor should focus on the long-term national interest with measures to spur investment and growth. I mean, that's key, isn't it, investment and growth?
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree with Esther. I'm sorry that we're supposed to probably be at loggerheads, but we actually agree on this, that, you know, they've been so short-termist that the idea is always, you know, how are we going to win the next election? What's going to seduce voters? You know, are they shallow enough to fall for another, you know, minimal little tax cut? Will that be enough to delude them all so that, you know, it's the economy stupid, that everything's rosy in the economic garden? Well, people aren't that stupid. They know that the pound in their pocket is worth much less than it used to be, that the cost of living has gone through the roof. The food they buy costs, you know, 2/3 more than it did 5 years ago. They are very well aware that we're in economic crisis, and any amount of window dressing for the Tories is not going to dissuade them of that.
I think they'd actually buy into a big vision, which neither party are offering, and that's what they're too scared to offer. They're terrified of offering an actually compelling vision for Britain, because they think, oh, but if I don't get this right, then they'll lose the next vote. No, it's about a consistent, realistic, optimistic vision for this country, and you have to be bold enough to back yourself.
And James, are you surprised at how sort of last minute it is? Because we read that the Chancellor and the Prime Minister will be meeting tomorrow evening to fine-tune what they're going to present on Wednesday. I mean, there's no further information that's going to come in tomorrow night that we don't know today, is
the
there?
words back of a fad packet do ring a bell here. You know, I'm certainly no fan of the Tories, but I think Jeremy Hunt has done as good a job as possible inheriting the disastrous situation from Liz Truss, a Prime Minister who was out last by a lettuce. So, you know, he did inherit an almost impossible economic situation, and he's tried his best, but I'm afraid I think him and the government are toast.
Yep.
Esther, your thoughts on the last-minute element?
Well, I mean, it just reeks of desperation. I mean, now everyone is looking towards when the next election is going to be, and I suspect it's probably going to be November, December time, because they need to buy themselves as much time as possible to try and, you know, put a bit more window dressing in. I mean, obviously, the Economist saying that you don't want to kind of stimulate the economy too much and kind of incentivize summer shopping because you've cut taxes by 2p is economically illiterate, and that's true. But I suspect the Tories might do that as a kind of last-ditch effort to not completely obliterate the party, which I think it might be too late for that.
James, to the Times and the Post Office still in the news. Tell us about the latest twist and turn.
I mean, we were talking about this before, Esther and I, and the optics of this are terrible.
Yeah.
You know, in January 2023, and I have to say this is all allegedly because Nick Reed denies this, the chief executive of the Post Office apparently demanded a pay package of more than £1 million a year. He was only on only in inverted commas on a salary of 573,000 the year before. And according to this report, this exclusive in the Sunday Times, he said he was going to make a drama of it. His patience has expired. He was basically throwing his toys out of the pram, according to this reporter, if he didn't get paid more money. And this was at a time some of the compensation claims had been settled, although because of the huge legal bill they faced, they only got, I think, was it £15,000 each when they were expecting 50. And of course, there are hundreds who are still uncompensated, which the recent panicky government action is trying to counteract. But the fact that the chief executive appears to have been demanding almost double his salary at a time when so many of his workers were suffering, and 4 committed suicide, many bankruptcies, many divorces, I think seems outrageous.
Yeah, the optics are terrible because we're not focusing on, well, has he done a good job? This is probably someone just triangling to try and get more money, which is his right as an employee. But actually, if you look at the fact that the case was settled, I think, at the end of 2022, and the victims were awarded in total £60 million, and there's still, many of them are still waiting for their compensation because they haven't been legally exonerated. And then you have the CEO trying to basically double his pay. It doesn't look very good, but we actually have to look at it from the perspective of, does he deserve it? Is just someone just trying to ask for more money? But clearly, at this particular time, the optics are terrible.
Indeed. Esther and James, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to take a break. Coming up, much more from the newspapers, including claims of an addiction to mayonnaise. That is in the Daily Star, surprise, surprise. We'll be right back with that and other stories. Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, James Rampton and Esther Krakue. We're going to take a look at the Times front page, first of all. And this very worrying story about an anti-anxiety drug that has been linked to hundreds of deaths. Esther, take us into this story.
So pregabalin, which is a drug prescribed for anti-anxiety, is a very highly addictive drug, and is apparently causing the fastest rising death toll of any drug in the UK. Apparently, medical experts have been recommending it or prescribing it because of the lack of non-chemical alternatives like therapy, which is quite strange, actually, because you don't usually have medical experts going for a less conservative approach when it comes to treatment of particularly mental health issues like this. And apparently, it's so addictive, it's harder to come off that drug than morphine and oxycodone. So it's really causing a lot of concern. I mean, I obviously have always been more concerned about the medicalisation of daily life and the rise in sort of the prescription of mental or psychotic drugs. But again, this is something that's probably concerning because it's actually extremely addictive. So you have people that are just cannot come off the drug, and their physical side effects are quite debilitating.
Yeah, James, the patients described the withdrawal effects as hell on earth.
Yeah, and the really shocking statistic here is 3,400 deaths over the past 5 years have been linked to taking this drug, which is a shocking amount. There are 8.6 million prescriptions were given for this drug just in England in 2022. And an expert says there's a woeful lack of provision in psychology, and it's easier, and perhaps this is the key word, cheaper, to chuck drugs at a patient. And that's the problem, isn't it? The lack of funding, talking therapies, they're known to be successful, but you have to pay people, and it's very expensive to do that.
Well, I think maybe we have to explore more creative approach, like community-led approach to mental health. I'm deeply uncomfortable with this idea of someone being anxious and then chucking a pill at them. I think that's completely unhelpful. I think it's something that only benefits one party, and that's probably the pharmaceutical companies. I think there has to be a more proactive approach to treating mental health issues rather than just throwing pills at people. Yes, it does have to do with, the availability of therapy and these sorts of appointments, but it also has to do with community and actual people's social support and the lack thereof. I think that's something that's definitely not addressed by taking this approach of giving people drugs, and certainly not drugs like this that are now seen to have.
So you're suggesting more scrutiny of how these drugs are.
Of course, and just more creative and proactive approaches to dealing with people's mental health issues, as opposed to the medical route, which makes me quite uncomfortable, if I'm honest.
No, I agree. I mean, it used to be called the liquid cosh, didn't it? Because it was a way of controlling people, and it was much easier and cheaper. But it's you're right, we've got to be more creative, but the problem, I imagine, for the NHS is that would be more expensive.
Yeah.
And so they're thinking, help, we already have no money.
You might have to outsource it. You might have to look at different departments that can help. You might have to look at, I don't know, religious communities and faith-based approaches. I mean, it really has to be all hands on deck because this is completely unacceptable.
Yeah.
Staying in the field of medicine takes us to the front of the Observer and a story about children and asthma drugs that have been prescribed to them, causing side effects. James?
Yeah. I mean, two very strong anti-drug stories, really, on the front pages of these papers. And this is also very shocking. That's an overused word in journalism, but it really applies to this. Montelukast, this drug that's prescribed for children with asthma, apparently has these very serious, in some cases, not in all, very serious side effects, including night terrors, depression, and in rare cases, hallucination or suicidal behaviour. Yeah. And this is a report from the MHRA. So a very respectable body is saying that it's reviewing it because it has further concerns about it. And it does make you very alarmed that so many children have been prescribed this. Some children have even been reported attacking family members when on this drug. So it's obviously got potentially very, very grave side effects. And again, it clearly needs looking at and possibly regulating because the first line of the Hippocratic Oath is first do no harm. And this drug appears to be doing serious harm to children.
Yeah. I mean, Esther, the UK Action Group are calling for more prominent warnings.
Yeah, I mean, the difference, I think, with this and the previous story is obviously asthma is a biological and condition. You have to treat it with drugs. I mean, you could talk about air quality and the fact that in inner cities, air quality has gotten worse. So you see the rates of asthma amongst young children has worsened. But this is clearly very concerning. I mean, this drug looks to have quite serious hallucinogenic effects. So you have to question, the extent to which it was tested. Obviously, you can't test on children. That would be immoral. but you do question the extent to which this was tested because for parents to think that their children are getting treated for asthma and then they wake up with these night terrors, depression, and in rare cases, suicidal behaviour, it's deeply concerning. So obviously, this is something that will make the industry sit up and look at their practices.
Indeed. Now to something completely different. Front page of The Star. A mayonnaise addiction.
Well, if we're on the subject of health, we were talking earlier, what is the health effect of being addicted to mayonnaise and getting through 3 bottles a week? Having said all that, and the caveats about the possibly disastrous effect of eating so much of that, there's something I love about the Daily Star. When the world is in complete crisis, many parts of the world are on fire, they have a story about someone who, and they've made up a word, mayo-holic, and I love the detail that she smothers it on curries and porridge. Everyone will go, ugh, that's disgusting. But it's adding to the gaiety of nations, isn't it? It's a bit of fluff, it's a lightness, perhaps a bit of escapism from the horrors of the news.
Exactly. While the world is on fire, let's celebrate someone whose taste buds clearly are not working whatsoever. Anyway, I wish this young lady all the best.
Well, they can't work because they only taste mayonnaise. Esther and James, thank you very much for taking us through the papers. We'll see you in the next hour.